Before we get started, I'd like to take a moment and ask you to join me to recognize that we gather and live on the plains, plateaus, mountains, and coastal lands that have been home to Indigenous peoples since time immemorial. We respect their Indigenous and tribal treaty rights, and we honor their culture today. At Forterra, we are actively striving to action these sentiments in our work, and we invite you to join us in this through your own words and your own actions. Washington's ecosystems and communities are being tested as never before. Communities are being uprooted and displaced. Open spaces, habitat, and recreational lands are threatened by irreversible conversion. Please join us to address economic inequity, health disparities, carbon pollution, and racial injustice by helping us to share land for good. We invite you, your family, your friends, and colleagues to learn and experience Forterra's mission through our Land for Good campaign. I'd like to offer a personal thank you to our sponsors who've helped make this conversation and our work possible. In particular, thank you to Amazon, Hermanson Construction, Hay, JTM Construction, King County, Outdoor Research, Methuen, and the Uland Foundation for supporting this event and our work. With that, I'd like to take a moment to share a little bit about Forterra's work through a short video, and then we'll come back to the conversation. Thank you.
More than 30 years ago, Forterra set out to help preserve what makes Washington so special: the wild lands, diverse communities, and vibrant rural towns that make this a place we love. Today, Forterra partners with landowners, agencies, communities, and organizations to build a more sustainable future for all. We lead land-based integrated projects, policy, and programs that contribute to healthy ecosystems and resilient communities. Since 1989, we have conserved more than 250,000 acres, and with your help, we keep those wins coming. With your help, we worked for common good, for the native species and diverse ecologies of Washington, for critical waterways and habitat, for our neighbors and the rural communities that have helped shape Washington, for our cities and the communities that help make Washington special. For everyone who shows up and helps us restore our urban forests. For the change makers, helping to envision a more inclusive and sustainable Washington. For the artists who help us understand ourselves, each other, and this place. With your added support, the dedicated team at Forterra can continue this work to support a healthy environment and resilient communities for all.
So thank you again for joining us to learn about Forterra's mission and the work of the leaders who have joined us today. This conversation is part of our spring campaign for support, which goes through May 20th. We ask that you please make a gift today and invite you to join us for upcoming panel discussions and the Land for Good Week self-guided and virtual opportunities to explore Forterra's mission and work. Today, we are here to talk about communities, both the challenges and opportunities they face, and how to support the well-being of neighborhoods through investment and respect for self-determination. I am honored to be joined by three leaders who have come prepared to share their insights and expertise into what's going on in the neighborhoods of Tacoma, Seattle, and Roslyn. I'd like to kick it off by first introducing Kiara Daniels, who will share her expertise about the Hilltop in Tacoma. For 150 years, Tacoma's Black community has made Hilltop home, persisting against historic redlining and modern-day gentrification to create a vibrant and loving neighborhood. This once underinvested neighborhood is now experiencing rapid redevelopment, often being advanced by outside forces without regard for the community itself. Hilltop leaders reached out to Forterra to acquire a vacant Rite Aid property to build attainable housing and commercial space in the heart of Hilltop. To do that, we've partnered with Fab 5, a hyperlocal Hilltop nonprofit that engages Hilltop residents in development and planning efforts, redistributing power and reclaiming spaces for the benefit of community. And with Fab 5's help guiding Forterra's effort, we are approaching this work in new ways in order to respect and uplift the neighborhood's voice and self-determination. Kiara will join us today and is an organizer for Fab 5. Growing up in Tacoma, Kiara is a longtime community advocate, and she also works as the business and community development coordinator at Spaceworks Tacoma. In Seattle, the Metropole is a historic building in the Pioneer Square neighborhood. You may recognize it as the long boarded up, beautiful stone facade building that stands kitty corner to the Smith Tower and across the street from the Chief Seattle Club. In 2019, the Satterberg Foundation purchased the Metropole to ensure organizations, particularly with BIPOC leaders serving the community, have a place in downtown Seattle to call their own. The Metropole will provide affordable office space and other amenities to nonprofits. Forterra has partnered with Satterberg in this work, and we're very lucky that Kendra Walker has joined the effort as the community steward of the Metropole building. Kendra is originally from Ohio and has extensive knowledge and experience as a facility manager in operations, sales, and in training. She has seen the challenges of nonprofits in acquiring and holding office space within Seattle. Kendra is guiding the programming of the project to ensure it meets the needs of BIPOC-led nonprofits and to ensure the space is designed and managed with those needs and aspirations first of mind. On the other side of the mountains, there's Roslyn, Washington, which many of you will have visited. This small town is a place of natural beauty and carefully preserved historic architecture. Countless people have taken a keen interest in this small town, which is striving to balance its identity as a rural working class community, originating as a mining town with its attraction to recreationalists and the resort community of Suncadia. The residents of Roslyn have expressed concern about rising housing costs, and the Roslyn Downtown Association reached out to Forterra in 2017 about an opportunity to purchase land for attainable housing and other community uses in the heart of Roslyn. Our final guest of the day, Jim Nichols, is familiar with Roslyn, and Jim is a teaching associate professor in the College of the Built Environment's Department of Architecture at the University of Washington. He is the director of Storefront Studio, an outreach design studio that brings architecture, planning, and landscape students to small town communities like Roslyn. I'd like to turn it over to Kiara, Kendra, and Jim to add a few words from your own perspective about what makes you passionate about neighborhoods and about the work that you do. And so with that, I'd like to start, Kiara, with you, then Kendra, and then Jim. You can just roll it on to each other.
Yeah, thank you so much, Michelle, for that introduction. I didn't realize how much you were going to say, so I had this whole thing planned, and you did it.
Go for it.
No, yours was so much better than mine. I appreciate your question, and I wish that I could say something really charismatic about my why, but my why is really just mostly about living and being born in a place and watching it change, and sometimes for the better, but a lot of times it's been it hasn't been for the better. And having, watching the people around you change and everything that you kind of know and love about a place that you call home change really gives me a passion to do something about it and to jump in before it's too late.
I can't think of anything more charismatic than love of home and love of community. Thank you for that, Kiara.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I guess I'll go next. So I've been working in downtown Seattle for several years and have worked with for-profit companies that are just, so many of them are just buying up real estate at a really thrilling pace, especially in Seattle, probably more so than almost any other city in the country. And I've just seen as the companies keep buying up the real estate, the rents continue to increase, and just really pushing out not really just even BIPOC communities, but also nonprofits in general. And so this is a really exciting project, the Metropole, in which we will have a space for communities of color in particular to have, a daycare facility, for them to have office space, for them to be able to have an affordable place where they can hold events. Like, where I'm so excited to see us have events from keynote speakers from all over the country to kind of look at the Metropole as a place that's welcoming, that's open, that's inclusive, that really uplifts the community. And so we're going to be again, smack dab in the middle of Pioneer Square, which is also exciting because obviously the original center of the city, and that neighborhood has gone through so much gentrification, which has pushed a lot of people out. So we're bringing the community back into that neighborhood, and it's a really exciting project to be on. So I'm just so happy to be a part of it, and just to see us really be able to speak for the community, finally, have their needs be met and heard, and just see this project come to life.
And for me, first, Roslyn is the focus of the activity with Forterra, but it's part of sort of a 20-year project to look at small main streets around the state, particularly King County. And we operate out of the Department of Architecture, and we're called the Storefront Studio, not because we only look at storefronts, but because that's kind of the place we locate ourselves on the main street, and then have our open houses to really bring the community in. Over time, we've developed a strategy about asset planning, both physical and social assets in the community, and we get the community to help us draw that up, and we illustrate that for the community. And then our strategies are really focusing on resilience, inclusivity, and authenticity. And there's lots of good things about the first two. Roslyn is unique maybe in the authenticity part. It just is steeped in authenticity. And as you were saying, the community has preserved that. So there's so much to build on. At the same time, the original industries have left, and the new sort of is coming in. So a big piece of it then is sort of managing change, figuring out what the asset is, physical or social, to nurture, bring forward, and protect, really. And that's where my students and I get involved, to help identify those with the community and to help in the kind of visioning process.
I think there's an interesting disconnect sometimes when we think about neighborhood preservation, where the focus becomes the buildings, the architecture of the buildings. And one of the things that attracts Forterra as a, historically an environmental conservation organization to neighborhoods is the living network that makes a neighborhood authentic and vibrant and connected. And Jim, the three things you named were authentic,
resilient, and I'm looking at my notes, resilient, inclusive, and authentic.
Yeah. So Kiara and Kendra, speaking from your perspectives, speak to what needs to be included for neighborhoods to have that, for a space like the Metropole to have that, versus being, a building facade that's empty of that heart and soul. Like, speak a little bit more about that as we think about the role that Forterra can play, the role that the supporters who are listening to your dialogue today. What's missing when we just have the building, and what more do we need to do as a community to support that the community side of that? Kiara?
I can go first. Oh, sorry.
Oh no, go ahead, Kendra. Kendra,
No,
go.
yeah, Kendra, you go ahead.
No, I was just, really, it's just really bringing the community to the building, right? So of course, we've got all this beautiful architecture in Pioneer Square, and a lot of companies have come in, redesigned, made it very modern, while also still keeping to the architecture detail, because those buildings are honestly just like so gorgeous. However, what I've seen is that a company will either put their own spin on things, right? And just say, oh, let's make this super modern. Let's do let's make this a wellness thing. And it's really not what the community needs because they've never asked the community what they need. So what we need to do is, and what we're doing for this particular project is that almost every area as we start doing programming is that we're asking the community, what could be of service to you? So do we need, what kind of meetings do you want to have? What kind of sayings do you want on the wall? What's important to you when you do select a daycare? What's missing? So for us, just really asking the community what they need and then incorporating that into the vision and the future of the project.
Oh yeah, go ahead, Jim. Did you?
I've heard it very simply put, who feels welcome here?
Yeah.
Who's welcome in the door? Sorry, Karen.
I like that. I think down in Tacoma, so, we've been, prior to working with Forterra, our project is called Design the Hill, right? And it's designed to be a multi-year, multi-building, multi-project, if you will, initiative. And it's really what we're paid to do is design buildings, but what we really do is we culturally preserve, we economically preserve, and we figure out how can we use this building or this architecture as a catalyst for change in our community. And that's really been part of the transformative work for us and also the organizations that we're working with, because we think that we come in and we're going to ask people, well, what color do you want on walls, or what do you want for green space, right? Those are the what we think are fun things, and people don't care about that. They want to talk about no, we need jobs here, and where's our businesses going to go, and how much is this going to cost, right? They want to know, are we really going to be included in these things that we're beautifully designing for people, and what does it take to make that happen? And so we've gotten so far away from the actual, like the physical part of it. We haven't gotten away from the physical part, but we have figured out how to design people, place, community through designing physical spaces.
So one of the things I heard all of you say is who feels included. And I think part of the problem has been that the proponents of projects, or ourself as a white-led organization, that we didn't have the understanding or awareness to ask the right people the right questions and to listen to understand. Kiara, can you speak a little bit about Fab Five's genesis as it relates to Design the Hill? And I'm going to guess, without fully knowing the history, that it wasn't an easy space to insert that, create that dialogue. Like, what was that challenge like for Fab Five to change the dynamic in how organizations and developers were approaching their work on the hilltop?
Yeah, originally, I have to be frank, like we had this idea of of this neighborhood, like of what it would look like to drive through a neighborhood that culturally represented the folks that have been there and that have been pushed out. But we had no idea like how far, like economically and culturally and really policy wise, we were going to be able to take this. And so it started with, well, it would be really nice if community was brought in, not maybe at 70% of design, maybe at 30% of design, so we could talk a little bit more about the art and maybe where we put it. And so we could just feel a part of the changes that were happening to our community. And it really was about buildings originally and how we felt and how we interacted with architecture. But that conversation, and we knew it was going to happen, right? We knew, we said when we were planning, we were like, well, we need to probably make space because I think, people are not going to want to answer these questions, but we'll let you figure that out when you get there because, it's really kind of like it's funny, we always have to like have these really awkward and really hard moments that we always know are going to happen. And so we plan for them emotionally. We know they're going to happen. And a lot of times it comes with tears. A lot of times it comes with frustration. There's a lot of trust building that has to happen in the beginning, like almost every time we meet, right? And so preparing for those difficult conversations and preparing to hear what we don't want to hear from community is really the essence of doing this community engagement work. And you know, I've been doing it for so long now. I know when those moments are going to happen. And I'm always like, yes, we've been working on this thing. We know this thing needs to happen. Let's have a community engagement event, because the people need to say it. And the people are not going to be as kind and as like gentle. They're going to tell you, and they're going to bring their tears and their stories. And those are what's going to move, you know, the folks that, you know, you folks and other folks to really make that move. And so, it was very difficult, and it was a series of events, and it was a series of really hard conversations, and really the community coming in and saying, absolutely not, we will not be a part of this, and we will stop it if you do not think about these things.
And maybe I'll ask Kendra this question, how do we start in the right place? Like, how could we be different as a community in terms of approaching this, so that we start at the place where the table is set differently, so that everybody feels that they have a seat at the table? Like, what could we be doing differently?
I think it really relates to kind of what Kiara is saying, is just starting as soon as you can with the community. So she said initially they were thinking about starting at the 70%, and then they're like, no, let's get them in 30%. What's really great about the project I'm working on is that they started even, you know, basically they bought the building and they immediately started having focus groups for the community, with the community, to determine, like, before we even, like, you know, get the architects and start designing this project, let's see what's actually needed and necessary. So I think we need to, just like she said, start as soon as we can from the get-go, and really inquiring, you know, what does this space look like? What's the feel that needs to happen? And what resources do we need to bring, or do we need to help the community with? And how can we do that? Versus just assuming that they need certain things, which I think is typically what has happened in the past. So instead of making any assumptions, let's determine from their needs and from their challenges how we can move forward.
So Jim, building on that, with Storefront Studios, like, how do you prepare your students for engaging in the neighborhoods and in these small towns, which I would guess probably also feel disenfranchised in terms of what's happening to them and around them? How do you approach that with your students to prepare them to listen well and to maybe approach the work in the right way from the outset?
Yeah, well, you know, we do try and embed ourselves, so we stay overnight and we eat breakfast and walk in the morning, and we've had people come out offering us eggs and stuff, and you know, so it's, you try and truly embed yourself and not just fly through. I think that's a good point of departure. And then a first thing where there's more of a kickoff meeting where you just ask people what they're, you know, a small group of community members, and you network out and get enough that you can sort of sit around a table together and hear what the dreams are and maybe the hopes and fears. And then from that, you go out and try and create this inventory of physical and social assets, just postcards kind of. And then you have an open house where you present the postcards, but it's in a setting where everybody can stand around and talk in front of them. And what'll happen is the community will say, well, why did you put that there? And you'll try and defend it. And or they'll say, well, you missed this whole great thing over here, and you'll send somebody out to get it. So the next time you come, it's been vetted, it's been edited, and it's not your ideas or your things, it's the community has identified them. And then really you go, well, you know, what could we do to this old whatever to make it better? And you say, well, we could do this or this or that. And you do before and after imagery. And they get it, that it's like, oh no, we don't want a water slide. We want a greenhouse. And so you develop again, a vetted thing, so that by the last one, everybody knows what they're going to see because it's their ideas. And, and that's always the compliment is, gee, these look like our ideas, yes, that's what our goal is.
So if you get it right, people will say,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
see myself here.
Yeah, well, or, like there's always a cranky person. So the cranky person thinks they're digging at you and like, well, I don't see anything we couldn't have done ourselves here. Yeah, no, that's the goal.
So it sounds like humility is the starting place to, and then respecting the self-determination of the neighborhood to recognize that, as whether it's, developing a building or supporting economic development, it's really supporting and letting the community lead the way and guide the way.
Yeah.
In terms of challenges, Kiara, that you see for the Hilltop neighborhood in the work that Fab Fives may be doing, even on the project that we're working on together, other projects, what are the challenges that you think are yet to be tackled, and what do we need to be doing to address those? What's ahead of us, challenging from a challenges standpoint?
I think part of the challenge is, and this really kind of goes back to the original question about seat at the table. I think the biggest challenge is that at the end of the day, we are still just a seat at the table. And when we don't have ownership in our own community, true ownership, it still allows these forces to continue. And unfortunately, everybody that comes in to build is not Forterra. Everybody that comes in to build doesn't have the same community building mindset. And so they're working, they have triple the budget, they have triple the capacity, right? And so those are the forces that we're working against. So not only are we trying to push these smaller initiatives as far as we can, we're thinking about how do we create ownership within ourselves. And I really appreciate the question that just came in the chat about that, because it really speaks to the challenges. And in order to, deal with what else is coming and the other private things that have no mind for the community, it's really about thinking about how can we take this seat at the table to then create our own seat at our own table, and then do that again and again, and think about, as we do these projects, how do we think about a policy? How do we think about this macro level change that doesn't allow these things to continue to happen? How do we think about cultural preservation on a policy level that allows us to keep what we have, and that doesn't lend us to folks with private dollars coming in and doing whatever they see fit, right? How can we preserve what we've built?
Kendra, what would you add to that or complement that with?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's great. I think the other thing that can be challenging is that we, even within these communities of color, we still can't be all things to all people. Right. So every, organization that we work with, they're going to have, their own goals and dreams that they're trying to accomplish. And so sometimes I look at it as we're trying to kind of bring everything together, but there's no way that we can ever meet every single need that every organization has. So similar to what Kiara says, we still need more of these organizations doing this work in our communities. And we still need more people investing in social justice dollars and really moving more of their investments in that arena, so that more of these projects can kind of come into our neighborhoods, and so that people can actually see the value of really bringing the people of color that are living and breathing in these neighborhoods, and letting them have more of a say in how their communities are formed and the development within the community.
Jim, any additional thoughts that you would add?
Well, maybe just that when you're not a bottom line developer, like Forterra is not, you have the opportunity or kind of joyous luxury to dream a bit. And there was an air quotes a little bit about ago, I think, Kiara, about what we're paid to do versus what all we're doing. And I think you have an opportunity like that. If you want to start a speech, starting it by, I have a planning report, gets you a certain distance, but starting it, I have a dream, grabs you. And so I think helping Forterra has the ability, and I would say Surf and City, has the, it's about helping people dream, I know you, the other two representatives are far less kind of abstract. I'm definitely academic in that way. You're truly there. But I do think you have to somehow bring the energy every day to allow the dream and to support the dream.
I mean, I think one of the elephants in the room here that we're sort of talking around is the characteristics of the development industry and the history that has led to the development industry and the money of the development industry being isolated, in particular from communities of color. And just to acknowledge that, I mean, it's a white male dominated field with structures and systems that, for anybody who hasn't read The Color of Law, I really encourage you to. It's not that it happened by accident. It happened with intention, and it happens systemically. Kiara, Kendra, Jim, anything that you would say about the elephant in the room and what changes if we could actually begin to shift the dynamics of who the developers are and where the funds are coming from?
Well, whenever possible, support alternative power structures. When I listen to the sort of, admitted ad of film there, I'm just so happy to be involved in this organization and thankful. I know I don't mean to be too sherry there, but really, it's really such a smart thing. So look for the stuff that reinforces what you believe, and then support that. That definitely sounds like a pitch, and it's not meant to be, sir.
I mean, it's exciting for me to be meeting a few Black-led development companies that are bootstrapping their way into the business. And, I think anybody who is a successful developer, whatever their background, took a lot of risks to get to where they are. And I think that begins to change things. It's just even the dialogues that I've had with those private entrepreneurs about what their aspirations are and the perspectives they're bringing. And, Kendra, in a way, the work you're doing with the nonprofits you're working with and creating that sort of first-class space is a version of it, right? Creating that access. So I don't know if you have any thoughts about how we change the dynamics, going back to maybe, the root of the issues.
Yeah, I mean, I think it really starts with where you invest your dollars, right? So not really, or just like Jim said, looking for those opportunities to invest. And also there's opportunities for these developments to even shift the ownership, right, to communities of color. So that's a big opportunity that we have. And also as the seed money comes in and things like that, there's more opportunities, right, to actually have some of these, BIPOC developers really be able to attain some of that, whether there's venture capital money or other opportunities to actually be able to go out and do the developments.
Yeah, I think that's such a hard question because the elephant in the room, really, that every supposedly progressive city is facing is the same problem. And I think that we have some reckoning to do with how progressive are we? How does it really line up with the way that things are lining up in our neighborhoods in terms of affordability and who gets access and displacement, because this is not a new issue. And we know that policy has taken place before we even thought to come in, just many years ago. And so this idea, bringing it to today, this idea of land banking excites me. This idea of really building capacity for other organizations to do this work on a large scale. And I mean, building capacity, if I was an organization like, um, you might not have money, but what you do have is expertise. You do have this really specialized expertise in development that I think that it really takes a long time to learn. And it really, even if you gave folks land, um, there's this expertise that needs to be there to be able to execute and do it right, and to be able to get the other kinds of dollars that are going to be necessary to make it happen. And so thinking about how to lend, um, I think organizations can think about how to lend themselves in that way that goes beyond what we normally see. I think it really excites me as well.
Very cool. So, how can our supporters support your causes?
Mm.
And what can Forterra do to support your causes? More. What more?
You know, I'll have a short answer and give the others time to think. You know, I think, you know, I really want to encourage the idea of building up an industry, like any place that where you can start to generate jobs. So Forterra is sort of in this cross-laminated timber, and understanding how the forestry industry could support that then could support modular housing, and that could become affordable housing. And look, here's the thing. So this systemic thinking about it is really pretty wonderful. And I would, that would be something I would sure encourage. It's harder in the other cases. And so, you know, for me, it's like, I want you to support a whole system. I don't want you to buy a new whatever. But on the other hand, Kendra and Kara, you know, it might be really helpful to get a fund for a particular piece of the building they're working on. So now you've had time to think about it, Kara and Kendra. What are you going to?
You know, I again, like at the beginning, I said, there's always this one thing I try to go around. I want to try to go around this crazy thing, but there is nothing, I can't think of anything more helpful than funds, right? Funds for individual organizations to do the work, funds for us to be able to make these projects the best that they can be and really set the standard for the industry. So in Tacoma, you know, we have gotten into this, into the realm of small business. And so at my job during the day, I've started a Black business incubator accelerator, so that when, you know, Forterra has this big project and all this market space, we have small businesses that can accommodate that, right? But we know that we still have this gap of financing that we need to be able to subsidize that space. We can't offer that at the space that the building needs to pencil. And so when we think about trying to push these projects forward, and we think about trying to make that community level change, there are things we can do policy wise, and there are things that we can do advocacy wise, and there are things that we can do with art, but really the dollars are the things that make the project push further. And so I encourage the folks that are on, that if you were going to give 10, give 20. If you were going to give 2,000, give 4,000, because that is, for every dollar that you spend, those are the dollars that are going to be able to, for when I go to ask and annoy, as I always do, we need to do more. We need to think about this in a different way. Nobody racks their brain at me, because we have these dollars already set aside for this creativity.
Kendra, you've experienced that at the Metropole.
Yeah, and I think just for the companies, just looking at your current investment portfolio and where are your dollars currently going? And is there opportunity? I mean, there's always opportunity, right? But let's take some of those, you know, where are the dollars going towards, you know, white-led corporations that, even if they're nonprofits, whether they're corporations or nonprofits that are actually doing the right thing, or are the dollars going more into those communities of color that are led by that are really trying to actually push the initiatives of even other communities of color, right? So that's what we're really focusing on at the Metropole. So the leaders and the nonprofits that are really working with the BIPOC community to push it forward. So just kind of doing a quick analysis of where are the funds currently going, and how can we put that more in the hands of the people that are actually working directly in the communities to push it forward.
Yeah, and I think one of the interesting challenges for us, and it's something that I've lived over my career, because when I started at Forterra, it was an aspirational entity. I mean, Gene, as the founder, was paying for the stamps, and I was just, a young, helper, and he paid for my time out of his private land use practice so that I could work on this nonprofit, which was the thing we were both most aspirational about. And so when I hear smaller organizations, and especially those led by people of color, talk about resource constraints, I've a little bit experienced what that means, and I've seen us grow. And then the question is, how can we, as a organization that maybe has some access that other organizations don't, how do we share that access, support ourselves so we can continue to do that work, but not have our success be at the expense or without regard for the needs of the community groups we're working on, and trying to figure out how to make the pie bigger, right? So yeah. So we are at 12:43. We've got a few more minutes. I want to encourage anybody online who would like to ask a question to go ahead and populate the chat. But Kendra, Jim, and Kiara, do you have a burning question for one another? Has something that one of you have said sparked curiosity that leaves you with a question?
I do have one based on kind of the last bit of conversation, which is, Kara mentioned the idea of building capacity. How do we build capacity? And that was kind of what you were talking about. We started very small and we've grown. And I'm wondering about that, and because, people are, well, how do you scale up this idea? And I kind of push back a little bit on the idea of scaling up, although I'm not, I'm interested, the idea is scaling out, not, how could we scale out and not up? And in our world, it's, who's like the biggest client possible, the biggest developer possible, or the biggest development community. But what's another way to think that? And how could we think of growth that's not necessarily getting bigger, but getting more embedded? Or, you talked about hyper local too. How do you become really big and stay hyper local? For me, it's, face to face, or at least something like this, that you make change, one face at a time, kind of. But so I'm really curious about that. I get why you would want to do that, but growing,
Yeah, and maybe if anything, it's growing resources, however the community best sees deploying it, but making more resources and more capacity available.
Yeah.
Jim, I appreciate that question. And I have talked to, we've been floating this idea around, and this is like, we have these super creative ideas, and then we have these ones that we keep like 50 years from now, like those are just too crazy. We can't bring those in right now, right? We're just doing too much. We've got to calm down. And I always wonder, right, this construction piece and this contracting piece, and architecture piece seems to be like the biggest piece, and sometimes the barrier to these projects. And we often, since you guys are doing this like new modular development, that is something that we've learned from somewhere else. And I wonder how we can use this new form of building and this new form of development to teach builders and contractors here that maybe don't have the capacity or they don't know how to do that yet, which is like almost all of them out here, right? How do we teach them? How do we help build them to do that thing? And then in turn, like the investment is that we have these folks that know how to do this and can do it affordably for the future for other people who want to do this, and including your other projects. Like those are the things that I think about on like a systems level. And it's more building inward and outward, but not like, I don't know. That's just something that's kind of just.
I have a super specific example of that idea where in Roslyn, I was driving by the high school the other day, and there was half of a prefab house that the building trades classes at the high school, if they have a sort of vocational thing, had built this demonstration piece. I thought, man, Forterra should get their CLT out here, get that high school class going on building a prototype. And, they drive by and it was going to be raffled off or something. So that's just such a perfect walk in the door, and there it is, seed, I think. And that could happen much more. I think trying to remain light and fluid somehow, being inspired driving by and seeing that the high school had this program. And, hey, couldn't we, in 3 phone calls, you'd know whether you were going anywhere with it.
Yeah.
Anyway. Got some more good questions here. I see one about, really where somebody wants to write a check and they want to know what it'll be spent on. Kara and Kendra, what do you need?
Oh, golly. Let's see. Kendra, you go first. You take that one.
I mean, we're working on this project, and it's honestly the construction cost alone just starts getting, it just starts climbing. You have a budget, and then and this is a kind of a big challenge that we face too. And you can go in and they can give you a proposal, and then all of a sudden they can change it, in the middle of determining, and that's a very real problem. And it happens, I would almost say, with every single project that we're doing, that we're working on. So there's always funds that are needed, just even at the beginning, just to get the project off the ground. And working with this organization that I'm working with right now, we will be able to do it. But there's a lot of other organizations that would be a roadblock for them. Where they're like, this is the amount of capital that we've built. This is all that we can do. And we're going to have to scale back, which means that we're not going to be able to meet the needs that we had told the community of what we could do. So that's always a challenge, is really just kind of always getting the funds just to even get the project off the ground.
And so, Kendra, if I hear what you're saying, so we've posted in the link for all the attendees, the links to Fab 5, the Satterberg Foundation, the UW Storefront Studio, and the UW Department of Architecture. And I think those are also up on the screen. So Kendra, in terms of support for the project that you're currently working on at the Metropole, you don't necessarily need donations to that project, but you're saying, look for other people of color led efforts and know that there are always gaps to any of those projects to support.
Exactly.
And then Kiara, Fab 5 does amazing work and could always use those resources to make the hilltop better and more lively, right?
Absolutely. We need as much capacity as we can get. And I would encourage, if I was going to do 2 things, I would give to Fab, and I would also give to funding this idea of subsidizing businesses. That is that is our dream. And I know that you guys have pushed the project as far as we've possibly, pushed you to. And so that is the one last piece that would really put the icing on the cake.
Awesome. And then Jim, anything that you would call on people to support?
Kendra and Kiara.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Yeah. Well, I want to be mindful of people's times. The Zoom dash from meeting to meeting at the hour. But I want to really acknowledge the leadership and vision of Kendra and Kiara and Jim. And thank you for partnering with Forterra. And I want to encourage everyone who's online to know that your support of Forterra's work allows us to work in community and to show up as our best selves and to make space to support the communities having self-determination in their in their realization. So thank you all for listening. It's exciting to have such a big audience today. We're really grateful to your engagement and support. With that, I hope you'll come to more of the conversations we have coming and look for our Land for Good Week events. And we appreciate your support. Take care.
Thank you, everyone.
Hi,
Thank you,
everyone.
Kendra. Thank you, Kiara. Thank you, Jim.
All right.
Not live. There we go.